What's going on, everyone? My name's Eric, and today on the channel we're going to be doing a deep dive on Dimebag guitar tone, and specifically we're going to be checking out the Randall Century 2. This is the second generation of the original Randall Century, which I covered a little while back on the channel. If you haven't seen that video, make sure you go check it out. I'm going to link right up here and in the video description below. But this is the second generation of that original Randall Century. Both those amps were used between the years of 92 to roughly 95-ish, between Pantera's pretty well their biggest albums, which was Far Beyond Driven and Vulgar Display of Power. And there's a lot of people who basically say that that is Dimebag's best tone, whether it was live or on the studio, but honestly, it's all great in my opinion. But all of that aside, we have a very rare piece of gear here, and I want to give a huge shout out to my good buddy Randall, who owns this amp, and he let me borrow this amp, as well as a few other amps that I've been demoing on the channel. I've only seen this in print ads and in like the home videos and old like Pantera live videos from YouTube, and it's very cool to have one of these in person here. So with all that being said, let's hear this thing in a full demo mix. Now, just like the original Randall Century, the 2 is still a solid state design. There are some updates on this one versus the original, which we will go over. This one still has the FET preamp section, still has a solid state power section. You can still do the channel blending with that XP technology that Randall had since the 1980s. We still have 2 independent channels with individual EQs for each channel. We have a master section over here. We still have the onboard power on the back, which I still love so much. We still got the sustain switch. All that stuff is pretty much carrying over from the original Randall Century. But now let's get into some of the differences between the Century 2 and the original Century. So on the original Century, we had 2 inputs. We had a high and a low input depending on the input signal of your guitar. This one here, we just have a single input down here. We still have the same individual EQ layout for each channel. We still have the bright control, except it's now moved to the treble control on the clean channel here instead of being on the gain control from the original Randall Century. We still have the original sustain boost, and it still does the exact same thing as it did on the previous Century. It'll cut the volume down, cut the mids down, add a ton of gain. Again, this is really going to be a key part if you really want a good high gain sound. On the last amp, you'd be able to pull the gain control and there'd be like a mid-notch switch. That is gone. We don't have that anymore. Let's push-pull on the distortion channel is the treble control. This is actually toggling between both channels. Pretty nice feature to have right up here if you don't have a foot switch. And going to the very end here, the power switch has changed. This is just like a regular on-off like push button that's plastic, has an LED in the inside of it. We don't have the 3-way toggle that had the ground hum like reverse on there. That would have been pretty cool to keep, but again, maybe it was just a bit of overkill that not a lot of people were using. Flipping the amp over to the back, we have a regular foot switch control, which looks like it's just going to be a regular 1/4-inch cable, maybe like a regular style foot switch as well. We don't have the 6-pin or 6-prong foot switch. That's proprietary to the old Randalls. I'm really happy Randall switched that for the 2. Much easier to live with. We have an effects loop. Don't have a line out or a preamp out like we did on the Century 1. I'm assuming not a lot of people were using that in the studio. We then have 2 speaker jacks on the back of it. They don't really have like any adjustments. It just says 4 ohm minimum, and I'm honestly thinking that this might have some automatic speaker load detection, so that'll automatically detect the ohms and the amp will just do the rest. A lot of bass amps have that, not a lot of guitar amps have it. Very cool to see it on a guitar amp. Something to be said about the impedance when you are running this amp at the 4 ohms that it's recommended at. This is going to be pushing out roughly 120 to 150 watts of power. If you go down to 8 ohms, this is going to go down to 100 watts. And I'm sure if you go down to 16 ohms, it'll go even less, but I haven't tested that out, haven't tried it. We then have the 120 volt AC plug that's on the back. And last but not least, there is a circuit breaker on the back of this. So let's say if there is a power surge or something, the amp goes down, you flick the switch as you would on the breaker box inside your house, and this thing's going to be back up and running instead of blowing a fuse, having to run to the store, figure out what kind of fuse it is, figure out if it's even in stock, and then find it and then bring it back and put it in your amp. This is just way more simpler and, again, very cool design that we don't see a lot of in today's amps. So at this point, we're going to pull the amp out of the mix. We're then going to hear it just plugging it in for the very first time. We're going to mess with all the controls, show you how they all work and how they all interact with each other, just to give you an idea of how this guitar amp would sound if you're plugging it in for the very first time. So now I've dialed the amp into my liking, and I'm going to boost it with a couple different pedals. I got a 6-band EQ, got a tube screamer, got a couple different guitars and couple tunings. We're going to plug all of that in. You're going to see on screen. We're going to go through a couple different cabinets, chasing the earlier Dimebag sound. Then we're going to move on to a different guitar. That's going to be chasing some of the later sounds. We got some different speakers in that as well. Again, just to give you an idea how versatile the Randall Sentry line of amps are, and that it's not just married to one era of Pantera or just doing the Dimebag sound. honest, this amp is going to be much easier to live with by comparison to the original Randall Sentry. The main thing is that if you actually are going to be using this live, you really don't have to worry about getting the proprietary foot switch for the amp. This one just runs on a regular 1/4 inch style jack, unlike the original Randall Sentry head that had the proprietary foot switch and the proprietary input jack and everything like that. Just like the original Randall Sentry, this amp sounds killer if you really dial it in on its own. I will say gain cranked, sustain boost on, treble and presence pushed up a little bit, mids and bass down. Again, that's kind of the Dimebag sound, the kind of the Dimebag EQ, if you will. Obviously, you need a couple more toys than that to really get it into Dimebag territory. But if you're just plugging straight in, this thing sounds great set up just like that. Clean tones sound pretty good. Again, this amp isn't really known for clean tones. Dime and Grady even pulled these amps as the clean amps. They replace it with like a Mesa Mark IV or something like that. This can get very clean, as you probably heard, but we really remember these amps for their high gain tone, not the clean tone. Single input is nice, so you don't really need a high or a low input for guitars. I mean, you can just kind of adjust your gain to taste at that point. I will say this amp also has a nicer high-end frequency curve by comparison to the original Randall Sentry. Now, I'm not sure if this is like an updated circuit or anything like that, or I'm not sure if maybe there's some component drift and some tolerances have kind of faded over the years on the original or even this one. This one sounds really good in the high end. It doesn't really sound buzzy or anything like that. But again, if you are turning up the low end on either of those amps, they are going to get pretty woofy. And one final thing that I really like about this amp is that it seems like you can really manage the XP circuitry, which is the channel blending. I'm sure you can really dial it in if you really want to with the proprietary foot switch or things like that. But if you don't have the foot switch, like, it seems like the channel blending like doesn't really happen, which is nice because I don't have the foot switch for this amp. So I don't have to worry about rolling the gain and the volume down on the clean channel just so I can hear the distortion channel and not hear any clean signal poking through, and vice versa. This amp and the original Sentry, they're both very picky in terms of what kind of overdrive or what pickups you're using. I tried the Dimebag with this one, and I did notice there was like some chirping in the high end. Even though the guitar that had the Dimebag was tuned pretty low, and I ran an overdrive pedal with it and the 6-band EQ, I still noticed like those really high-end chirps on the low strings, and again, it was really hard to dial out without making the amp sound really woolly and muddy. I will say the EMGs and the Wild Audio guitar that I used tuned down to drop B sounded really good as well. I did find that this amp was also pretty picky with overdrives. I tried an Earthquaker Plumes. Didn't really sound that good in this amp. I tried a couple different tube screamers. I then settled on the TS7. That's an older, like kind of cheaper tube screamer. That one sounded really good to me. But then again, I really found that this amp really comes to life when you have like a 6-band, 10-band, 7-band, however many levels of equalization you want. You throw an EQ pedal up front, you have way more options in terms of shaping your sound like that. Play around with them, try different things, and at the end of the day, just have fun with it and just, you know, have fun playing your favorite Pantera and Damageplan riffs for this and honoring Dime's legacy. If this popped up and a Sentry 200 original popped up for the same money, I'd probably go with this one. Easier to live with, and sure, it's missing a couple bells and whistles in terms of like the things that you might not think about, like the actual ground loop power switch. You know, we don't have the preamp out, we don't have a couple other things, but honestly, I would live with this. Both amps sound really great, but for what it's worth, and if it was my money, and if they were both coming up used, I would probably go for the Sentry 200 too. So that's going to do it for today's video, checking out the Randall Sentry 200 II. All thoughts and opinions down below. Let me know if you want to see more content with this. I'm also thinking about shooting out this amp with the original Sentry 200 as well. Let me know down below if you want to see that video happen. And if you're also new, make sure you consider subscribing. Got tons more Dimebag related videos on the channel. And if you are a returning subscriber, make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss a single video that I upload. Thanks for checking this out, and I'll see you next time.